Welcome to Coffee and Keys, where we blend our expertise and personal experiences to unlock your awareness of the real estate industry.
They're the best.
Here they are.
And now, here's your hosts, Darlene Kemp and Crystal Jacques.
And we're back, feeling like home.
Yay! Another podcast to go.
Another one under our belt.
Yay! I think we're going to switch it up a little bit this week, right?
Happy to do it.
So close to Independence Day that I figured it would be a great time to just talk about our veterans and the loan programs that will benefit them. So I figured we'd talk about our VA loans. What do you think?
Absolutely. I'm for it. Coming from, being a veteran myself and being married to a veteran.
Yeah. My husband's 20 years retired too. So yeah, we do a lot of VA loans in this area.
We do.
So I love the VA loans. That they're one of the best loan programs out there. They kind of give the best rates, best terms, easier financing, lots of little things that we can do to help them qualify. So love VA loans. But I will say that a lot of veterans don't really understand them or don't know what they have and how great they are. So I thought
all I get is I qualify for a VA loan because I'm in the military.
Right.
Some buyers that I have gotten that retired think that they don't qualify because they're retired.
Or they think that I've already used my VA, so I can't use it again.
I can't use it.
It's not true. Yeah. I mean,
all right.
Once you have a VA entitlement, as long as you have your VA benefits, whether you're active duty military or if you've gotten out of the military, as long as you've done, 24 months and that you didn't have a dishonorable discharge and you still have your VA benefits, then you would have your VA loan. So,
and does it last forever? I mean, can you keep reusing it?
Absolutely. You have a dollar amount of entitlement. See, one of the other misconceptions is they think that VA gives them the money, but VA doesn't have the money, right? So
let me throw out the top 5 misconceptions that I get, because by the time it gets to you from me, I've cleared up a lot.
A lot of them. Okay.
A lot of them. So let's talk about the top 5, and then you could take it from there.
Okay. All right. You want to hit them one at a time, or you want to hit them all 5 of them, and then we'll go from there?
I'm going to throw all 5 out at you, and then we'll go through each one.
Then we'll figure out which one we're gonna tackle first. All right. So what is that first misconception that you think you hear a lot?
So the first one is the Veterans Administration is the one that loans me my money. I get a pot of money from them.
Yeah.
No. Okay. The second one, because I qualify for a VA loan, I do not have to bring any money to the table.
VA allows you to do 100% financing, but still, you still have closing costs. So we'll talk about that.
Okay. So the third one, I am required by the VA to have a home inspection.
No.
And piggybacking off of that, the VA will send an inspector to the house before closing.
No. They'll send a VA appraiser to the property. Yes. We always recommend a home inspection, but it is not required.
It's not required.
Now, some inspections are required, such as termite. Or, if you've got a well, you might need to get the water tested. So there are some things that are required, but a home inspection is an option.
Not required.
Option, yeah.
Okay, the last one, and we'll start at number 1 again.
Okay.
I can buy my home using my VA loan as an investment property.
No.
So let's go back. Let's cycle back to the first one. We could talk about each one. And hopefully we won't run out of time.
Right.
We can't do another part 2.
And again, I love VA loans, so I could talk about them forever. I think they're great loan programs, and I do hear a lot of misconceptions. And, and I think the biggest one is that they think that if they've used it once, they can't use it again, which is totally not true. So,
I would like
number 1.
Okay, so the first one, the VA administration loans me a pot of money.
Yeah. No, VA encourages lenders to lend to veterans. And by encouraging lenders to lend, their money, VA will guarantee these loans. In the event of a default, then those lenders can be made whole. So, right. So anytime that somebody is lending money, usually the rate and the terms are based on risk. The higher the risk, the higher the rate, right? So if VA is going to guarantee, and they guarantee the top 25% of that loan in the event of a default, plus they're securing the property, right? So it gives the lender a good feeling that in the event something does happen, because life does happen, that they will be made whole in the end, right? So it's easy to lend to veterans. Now, in order for VA to guarantee that loan for a lender, we have to follow their underwriting guidelines, which I think are the best underwriting guidelines out there. They're so true to real life qualifying, right? So they use a percent of their income to qualify. Guideline 41%, but again, we always, can go a little bit higher depending on compensating factors. But they also use something called residual income, which means after you've had all your bills, taken out all your taxes, taken out all that stuff, then you have a certain dollar amount that you have to have remaining after that. And it's based on the family size. The other thing that is different from a VA loan is childcare can actually be considered a debt. So when you're talking about real life financing, they're looking at the whole picture. So they're not so zoned in on just ratios. They're really looking at what's known as residual income to qualify them, which is more of like real life qualifying. But it's one of the easiest loan programs to qualify for.
So can any lender do a VA loan?
No, they have to be a VA approved lender. And that's where a veteran would go to get a VA loan, as a VA approved lender. Now, some lenders are approved to originate those VA loans, and then some lenders are approved to originate those VA loans, and then also they're delegated to underwrite them, process them and underwrite them, and actually close those loans. And then we send the file to VA for guarantee. And then the file sold on the secondary market, just like everything else, all the other loans, basically are. But VA loans, if you go to a lender that is approved through VA, we can take it from beginning to end. It's actually a little different other loan programs, but once I've done them for so many years, they're pretty easy loans for me. You just have to know what to look for, right?
So there's a certificate, and that's another question that I get when I get a VA buyer. So they say, I need to go to the VA and get my certificate.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, certificate of eligibility. So what happens is when I get a veteran that comes in order to find out whether he has entitlement, full entitlement, partial entitlement, because you can have more than one VA loan, which is another misconception. People think they can only do it one time. So VA guarantees a dollar amount of the loan, right? So they have to guarantee 25% of that loan amount. And each veteran is given a dollar amount based on the conforming loan limit in the area. So
it's based on where they are.
Correct. So the federal conforming loan limit right now is $766,550. So VA's dollar amount of entitlement is 25% of that. And every veteran gets that based on the area they are. But there are some higher, what they call high conforming loan limit areas, sometimes in California, some up in, in our area, if they're up there, Northern Virginia area. They may have a little bit a higher conforming loan limit. So that guarantee is based on where they're buying the property. So if they're buying in California, it could be a higher loan limit, or up in Northern Virginia, it could be a higher loan limit. So there'll be a dollar amount of guarantee is based on where they're buying. And that dollar amount of guarantee, in order to find out how much guarantee a veteran has, we have to order that certificate of eligibility. VA can go online to the benefits.va.gov website and request their own certificate of eligibility, but usually we just pull them offline.
How long does it take to get it?
I mean, if we can pull it offline, no time. We can just
minutes.
Yep. Sarah, my assistant / daughter, pulls them off online for me whenever
So it's not like
have
we've
a
got to
veteran.
wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get it.
There has been times for some reason where the file won't pull up, and then there's a form that we get the veteran to fill out, and we upload it and send it to VA just to prove. But basically, anybody that has done at least 24 months of active duty, and as long as they, whether they're still in or out, as long as if they were released, that they were released with something, as long as they weren't released with a dishonorable, then they still maintain their VA benefits.
Okay.
If they're active duty, really they have to only, they can be in for 90 days. And then
they can qualify for a VA loan.
Just after 90 days. Yep.
90 short days.
Yep. But yes, otherwise it's 24 months. Now, if they serve during wartime, they only have to serve 90 days. If they serve during post-war times, it's only 181 days service time. So if you had somebody that was, say, a reservist or National Guard, they normally need 6 years of active service in time frame, unless they
being
were
in the reserves for 6 years.
Being in the reserves for 6 years, they qualify for the VA loan, VA entitlement as well. Unless they were called to duty, again, for 90 days during wartime, 180 days post-wartime, they were called to duty, that active duty time counts towards that parameter. So then they would qualify for that as well. So
that clears up a few things.
Mm-hmm. And even a surviving spouse can qualify to use the veteran's entitlement one time.
One
as long
time.
As they have not remarried. Yep. So if you have a surviving spouse of a veteran, say, that went missing in action or deceased, then the surviving spouse can use that veteran's entitlement one time, as long as they haven't remarried.
So they can buy a house and then using the VA.
100% financing, as long as they've got
100%.
enough entitlement to cover.
So if they sell that house and, they sell it and want to rebuy a house, they can't use the VA again.
Not a surviving spouse. They can use it one time.
One
time to buy a house. Yeah.
That's something I thought I knew everything. And
Yeah.
this is something I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So let's go to number 2, because this is the big one. This is the one that I get the most. Because I qualify for a VA loan, I don't have to have any money walking in the door. I don't have to pay anything at closing.
They get 100% financing, which means no down payment. As long as they
so
have.
That's what makes it different from FHA and conventional.
Right. Is that down payment requirement?
There's no down payment.
And if they have full entitlement, after I forgot to mention in the other one, there's no limit to that house that they can buy as long as they qualify. There's no sales price limit. As long as they have full entitlement.
$1 million house using their VA.
100% financing. No money down.
With no money down. However,
they
where's the money?
still have closing costs. So your down payment is one thing. So they give 100% financing, so it's zero money down, but they still will have closing costs associated with that loan. Now, if we were in a buyer's market, they could ask the seller to pay all their closing costs for them. They could even ask the seller to pay an additional 4% to pay off debts if they want to in order to qualify.
Let's not
or
get
to pay
into that.
Right? Right now, you and I both know it's not a buyer's market. It is a seller's market. It's a lot harder to get a seller to agree to pay those closing costs for a veteran or to pay any of the other benefits. But it's still out there and it's eligible to do. But unless you've negotiated those closing costs to be paid, you're still going to have closing costs associated with the loan.
So you do have to walk in the door with some money.
Yeah, so we still have to verify that you have enough funds to pay at least the closing costs. So, on average, rule of thumb, for an average sales price, an average closing cost in our area would be about 3% of that sales price.
Right.
Give or take. So it's still not bad for somebody to walk in the house with 3% if you can
3%.
Yeah. If they're below that medium sales price, it may be a little bit more because a lot of closing costs are based on percentage or fixed rates rather than just percentages. And if it's a higher sales price, it might be a little less than that 3%. So, but that's a good rule of thumb. But once I get a loan in for a veteran, I'll do the closing cost worksheet and we'll find out exactly how much money that they need. And that's how much I'd have to verify, but there's no money down, zero money down on it. Great
So-
loan program, easy to qualify for.
Let's go back because that's another thing. I know how I write a contract, and I
Right.
always include that in there, even if we don't use it, because it's hard to go back to the seller and say, oh, now we want to pay off some credit card debt. Because if I were the seller and my buyer's saying, I want you to pay off my card, I went on a vacation and I want to buy this house and, I use that card and now I want you to pay that bill, that's hard to recover. But if your agent puts that in, a sentence on when you come to closing cost and it's in there, then you don't even have to, if they sign that contract, you don't have to discuss it again in the event that you might have some closing costs left on the table. And now we're saying, you know what, we got $1,000 left over. Do you have a credit card bill, that we can pay off?
Yeah. So it's always good just to put, that if you are going to ask for closing costs, the sellers agreed to pay a certain dollar amount, towards closing costs, prepaids, points, or even to pay off the debt as allowed by lender. And then you're kind of covered for everything. Yeah, that would be. As a lender looking at a contract
signed, once it's signed and that's in there, you're home free. But it's hard to add it in there
afterwards. Yeah, I mean, there has been times where the appraisal came in a little bit higher, and as long as the seller had the same net, sometimes we'd have an addendum to kind of include some of that in cases where they might want to pay extra points to get a lower interest rate, or they might want to pay off a debt which gets them better qualified.
But that's a little different.
It is. Yeah, that's a little bit different. And, again, where I've used a lot of these too, let's say it was somebody who was renting a house and now they want to buy it and the landlord's willing to work with them. And I can tell the landlord, they can't qualify to buy it now, but if they paid off this debt or that debt, then they could qualify for it. And then we adjust that sales price as needed so that they can qualify for that loan. And the seller.
So it's the approach.
It's the approach.
Yeah.
And it's the situation. Every situation is different. So it's nice to know that it's in my back pocket, but I won't use it all the time because in this market it's tough. But when I first got into the business again, it was a buyer's market. It was taking 6 months minimum for sellers to sell their house. And if it was a VA buyer that was getting relocated or a VA seller that was getting relocated somewhere else, they understand and they'd be willing to pay those closing costs because there's a lot more people out there with no money than with money. So it means some more buyers are out there to buy their house. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we use it all the time.
Here's a big one. The third one. I am required by the VA to have a home inspection. Now, I was around in real estate 2020 through 2023 during the hot market. Well, it started in 2019. And I can tell you, even though I suggested us having a home inspection, it was so competitive that that's the first thing, I'm representing the buyer and the seller's agent comes and says, well, nobody else is having a home inspection. I like your numbers, but nobody else is having a home inspection. So if you take that home inspection out, we'll consider your contract. Now, I can only relay that to my buyer, that information. And I'm saying, but I think we should have a home inspection. They're like, but I love this house. I'll do without it. So you can.
They can. VA does not require a home inspection. We encourage it, obviously, but we do not require a home inspection. That's something that's done outside. We do require an appraisal of the property, which is totally different, right? A home inspector is going out there to look at the property, tell the buyer what condition it is, how long some things may last, right? You know more about home inspections than I do. You can tell us what a home inspection is. Which is different than a VA appraiser, right? An appraisal is going out to tell the lender. And remember that the lender wants a third-party unbiased opinion of the value on the property. So when I get a loan file in, I'm actually ordering it through VA and VA's web portal, and they're deciding who the appraiser is to send out there. So we don't even know who that appraiser is assigned to until after, VA assigns it. But the appraiser is going out there for value. In the event that, God forbid, life happens and a veteran can't make the payment and we have to foreclose on the property, the appraiser is to protect the lender to make sure that we can resell it for the value we lent on. Remember, it's 100% financing.
It's
They do
100%.
guarantee the top 25%, right? But we still have to make sure that we can sell it. And there's a huge cost in foreclosures and so forth for lenders. So they just want to make sure that they're scored. So the appraisal is there to tell us the value, because we will lend up to 100% of that appraised value or the purchase price, whichever's lower. So if the purchase price is higher than the appraised value, we're only going to lend at the appraised value.
So what happens between the difference? So it's higher.
Yeah.
Let's just
so if
throw
the appraisal is higher, the veteran made out. Right? If the appraisal came in
Then the
higher,
sales price.
we're only going to lend based on the sales price. That's all the veteran has to pay for the property is that sales price. That's that's the lower up. But if the appraisal comes in lower, then
the sales price.
Then we're only going to lend based on that. Now, can a veteran pay more than an appraised value? Yes, they can, but they're not required to.
But they can make the choice.
They can make the choice. The seller cannot hold them obligated to pay more than the appraised value. However, the veteran can choose if they want to, especially in this market, and we've seen it. They may choose to pay $10,000 more than appraised value if they want to. They can,
but they can't finance it.
They cannot finance it. Then that money would have to be paid down as a cash deposit. We're only going to lend 100% financing based on the lower of the sales price or the appraised value.
So circling back to 2. That could be added in because they are having to bring money to the table if they choose to pay more for the house than what it's worth.
Correct. So they can do that. As far as what that appraiser is looking at as far as value, then the other things he's looking at is really just safety, structural soundness, making sure that the house is secure, right? So they're just going to be looking for things that could be a hazard. Let's say the roof is leaking. That could definitely be,
that's a problem.
An issue. That's a problem, right? That could be a structural issue over time. Your roof leaks for so long, all of a sudden you could have some structural issues.
Right.
Let's say you walk in the house and you're in one of those houses where you feel like you're like walking.
Oh gosh, how many homes like that have I walked? Oh gosh.
So again, an appraiser is not an engineer or even a classic contractor in most cases. They're really just there to look out for those things, and if there's a red flag that kind of the appraiser sees, he may condition that appraisal for an inspection of certain things, right? There's rotten wood on the house. He's going to want the rotten wood replaced. Or if feels like there's an issue with a roof, he may want a certified roofer to go out there and inspect it and make sure that it has.
So he can require that, or he or she, as an appraiser, can require that those things be corrected prior to closing. But it needs to be corrected by the seller and not the buyer.
Not necessarily. He doesn't.
The buyer can correct
it. The buyer can correct it. Obviously, the buyer could correct it as long as the seller is willing to let him correct it, or they can negotiate for the seller to do those repairs.
Right.
Or the other thing that a veteran can do is he can request a waiver for the repairs on the VA appraisal. And a lot of people don't realize that they can do that.
So the big one are the handrails.
Yeah, safety issues like that. Or so if there's something there, or, I've seen it where, there was some missing decking boards on the back that, that could be a trip hazard, or, things like that. Or, so a veteran can say, hey, look, I don't have access to the property right now. I really want this property. The seller, for insurance purposes, doesn't want anybody doing work on the property or being in there. And I'm going to request that VA allows me, a hardship allows me to do this. And in most cases, they will allow a veteran to do it, to waive some of those conditions. Now, they won't if they're like real hazards, like fire hazard from electrical or something like that. If there's something in there that is just a hazard, then they can deny it. But yes, we can send up a request to VA and ask VA to waive those repair items that they found on a VA appraisal, where it's really tough to have that happen on anybody else, but VA can waive it.
So when I have a VA buyer, and some of the buyers, they want to go into these homes, fixer uppers, right? I pay close attention to what is in that house, because there's some sellers that say, I am selling this house as is. I am going to do no repairs. So if there's any, and you've gotten the call from me many times standing in the house in those homes, the buyer wants to see this fixer-upper. We walk in, and I mean, usually those are fixer-uppers for a certain reason. Right. I've walked into homes, they had no toilets. They've had no sinks.
That's an issue.
Well, it is if it's the 12th house.
However, a lot of people, when you're talking about cosmetics, yes, I don't care if there's marks all over the wall. We don't care if there's stains all over the carpet. Those are things that a VA appraiser, he's going to acknowledge when he is putting a value on it, but he's not going to require that those items be done. Now, if you have a carpet with a hole in it and now it's a trip hazard, he may condition for that to be done. Yeah. Or if it's just plain wood floor, the subfloor, he's going to require flooring. But it doesn't have to be pretty, right?
But if you
it has to be safe.
It has to be safe. But if you're in a fixer-upper that the seller says, I am not going to do any repairs, you're going to buy this house as is, and you walk in and there's no toilets, there's no sinks. I had one just recently, there was no stove. What do you do in that situation? I would never, and I tell my buyer this, I don't recommend that you repair somebody else's house, because it's not your house until it closes.
Yeah,
Anything
we all know
can
that
happen.
anything can happen between that and until the day it closes. You don't own it,
Oh,
so
you
you're
don't
absolutely
own
right.
it.
Yeah, I mean, and there are certain things that we can do for that. Again, what are the that's when you may say, let's do a home inspection and find out what's really wrong with this house, right? Because if it's just cosmetic, totally different ballgame than if it's structural safety soundness issues. Right. Those things, may have to be, taken care of. Can we do an escrow, hold back and have some money held back and have the buyer do it afterwards? We could, or he can ask for a waiver for those. But typically, if it's a structural issue or a really, the house could catch on fire tomorrow if this isn't taken care of when you turn on the electricity, then those items, they are going to require to be done beforehand. And if the seller's not willing to do it, maybe it's not the house. Or maybe they don't do the VA loan and go a different route on a renovation project or something. So there are, I have a construction loan, right? So those houses we could buy on a construction loan and refinance it into a VA loan afterwards. So there are, there's always circumstances
you can refinance
into a VA loan. Absolutely. We can do a construction loan for all the rehab.
So that's kind of the way around it.
So we can around it. Yeah. Yeah. So if they really, really want it, now they'd have to qualify for not only the VA loan, but they'd have to qualify for the construction loan.
Right.
So, that's when we'd have to have, our I's dotted and our T's crossed and make sure that they qualify for both loans programs. But there are ways to work around it. Sure.
Wow. Okay. So the last one. Oh,
I do want to mention one more thing.
Okay.
They don't
go
require,
right ahead, Darlene.
They don't. When you say inspections, they don't require a home inspection, but there are certain inspections that VA does require, and having a clear termite is one of those.
That's a good. So a clear termite.
Termite is So if it has termites, we spray for termites. The buyer can pay for it at closing, whatever.
Right.
If there's structural damage, because termite or moisture damage has done something in the crawl area, and now you have joists that are bad, or headers or footers or whatever you call them. If there's something structurally wrong with a property, that's when we may have an issue, and we'd have to prove that the work was done and it was done that didn't.
That's a pretty important
negatively
one.
infect the structure. So that's why I wanted to mention that they don't require a home inspection, but they do require.
But you do have to have a termite inspection.
Right. And if there's structural damage, then we may have an issue on that one.
And just to back up, the VA does not send an inspector to the house after or prior to closing. That's probably that's
we
one
have
of
to see the report, but we don't send
ones.
anybody out there. The only person we send out to the property is the appraiser for that. Yeah,
for the VA.
Yep. So that was number 3. What was number 4?
That was number 4.
Oh, that was
the
number
VA
4. Okay.
will send an inspector to the home. So the last one, number 5, I can buy my home using my VA as an investment property. So that gets a little gray, because when I say, no, you can't, and they say, well, my neighbor rented out their home. There's a tenant living in their home, and they used a VA. So clear up the grayness out there.
It's really not gray. It's you're going to buy it as a primary property, period. We do not rent for investment property. You have to live in it.
And you have to occupy it by a certain amount of time.
Every loan program, if you're buying as a primary property, typically wants you to move into the property within a reasonable amount of time, normally 60 days. However, VA could be a little bit different. The spouse, because veteran military orders, things like that, you've got a veteran that's, stationed overseas, but the wife and the kids didn't want to go.
Right.
They can occupy the property as a primary residence for the spouse.
Oh, for the spouse.
For the veteran. Mm-hmm. So the spouse can own or occupy that. Or let's say, in fact, I just had one approved where he's getting stationed in North Carolina. And he's really not going to be there for 4 months, but he was afraid he wouldn't be able to find a house or get a house or negotiate something. Plus, he's going to be off to school before he's stationed there. And so what they say is a reasonable time must be with it before 12 months is the actual guidelines.
So there's an
VA.
exception.
There is. You can't just do it just because, and you can't put a tenant in the property. It's not for investment. But they say you can, as long as it's within a reasonable amount of time, but reasonable has to be within 12 months. But again, the spouse, children can satisfy that owner occupancy there. However, you're buying it with an intention to live in as your primary residence. Now, here's the caveat on that. You can buy a single family home. You can buy a 2-unit home and rent out one side. You can buy a 3-unit or a 4-unit home.
We just had a buyer do that. I think it's a
great way for the young military guys in there. Mm-hmm. They've got a lot of military friends there. They go in and buy a 2, 3, or 4-unit property, and they live in one side, charge rent on the other. They probably
They're paying their mortgage.
To pay their mortgage. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And then here's the other kicker on that one. Even if it's either primary property, 1 unit, 2, 3, or 4-unit property, that was their first home. They could use the military to kind of build up their real estate portfolios, because now they can still go out and buy. Let's say they get transferred, and now they're going to rent this property out. They can rent it out after, as long as you've lived in it and you purchased it with the intent to own or occupy it. Now they're going to their
intent is the key word.
Correct. And now let's say, they bought it and all of a sudden the military 6 months later transfers them. Yes, they can rent that property out. And now the next place that they go, as long as, they can still buy using another VA loan. So you can have more than one VA loan at a time.
So it's called a split.
It's called split. So that's a partial entitlement. So in other words, they've used, again, they can buy in our area up to $766,500 with no money down, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say they only bought a $300,000 house. Now they can buy $266,550,000 house with no down payment. Right. So they can still buy another property, right? And let's say they have a little short on entitlement. They can replace that entitlement with a down payment if they wanted to, right? So you could, slowly move in different areas and buy more property, and then they can buy that one under their VA loan and then stay there for a year or two and then rent that one out and then go to another duty station.
Doesn't there have to be, so in Hampton Roads, we have several bases and they're not that far apart. So I've had buyers that had a VA and they're stationed at one base. They get a set of order and they're going to the other base. Isn't there a distance? You have to have a distance between the two homes. So you can't just go around Hampton Roads or down the street and around the corner and say, oh, I'm going to do the split on entitlement on this house.
Yeah. FHA loans have a requirement like that, but not VA. So They could live in that house for a year. They bought it. They lived in it for a year. Now they can turn around and buy another house down the street if they want to. It's intent to buying it. You can have more than one VA loan even within a 50-mile radius or 100-mile
Isn't
radius.
that something?
Yeah, FHA loans are a little bit different. You can't,
There has to
but
be a
VA
distance.
loans, there's no distance.
So
No distance requirement.
they can have a set of orders at one base, and we just had a client that kind of did this. They get, a set of orders at the same base, so then they want to rent out this house and go buy another one in the same neighborhood. They love the neighborhood. They can do that on a VA.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as the new house they're buying, they're going to move into as their primary property.
But they can rent out the other one.
And rent it out as the other one. Absolutely.
So that's awesome because military, to live off base, they get a basic housing allowance. Right. So
based on the area they're
basically, go ahead.
We always need a copy of their orders because we know that housing allowance is based on wherever they're stationed for the most part. So we do need a copy of the orders. And if they are going to own or occupy that property, you're right, they do have to be within, most of the time, a good travel distance. Again, rule of thumb, 50 miles. Can you drive there? Is it going to be realistic for you to drive there? However, I did do one for a military veteran who their job was remote. And as long as they had a letter from their command that said that they're allowed to work remote, then they can buy it as a primary property and work remote. They just have to have a letter from command that they can go anywhere. So, and here's the other thing too. There are some military folks that are, duties and high alerts. So they have to be able to get to the base within 30 minutes. So we're going to look at the orders, and whatever the orders say you can or can't do is what we're going to allow you to do for housing, because you do have to have that as a primary property. However, if you have a spouse, and, I've known some people that, they're in a really busy area or not so good area, or they, some people in the middle of Washington, D.C., but they don't want their family to live there. They want their family to live somewhere else. So you can do that and have the spouse occupy that property as a primary property. However, if it's outside that travel area, then we would also have to count some type of housing for that veteran. So if that veteran is renting a apartment or something like that close to the base because he has to be there, we just have to count that in the qualifying. But the spouse can still own or occupy that property even if it's outside that radius.
So what happens if you have two military members? I've had that.
Yeah. A lot of people so VA loans are typically for veterans. So you have to have a veteran on a VA loan. However, what if you have two veterans that aren't married? Can they buy a house together? They absolutely can. How do we do that? Whose entitlement are we going to use? So we can do something known as a split entitlement, where we're going to take 50% of the dollar amount of entitlement from one veteran and 50% of the dollar amount of entitlement from the other veteran. And we do what's called a split entitlement. Yeah. Technically, you can actually have a veteran and a non-veteran buy. But keep in mind that non-veteran doesn't have entitlement, right? So now they have to put down 25% of their half of the house. This veteran gets in with 100% financing, and now the other veteran has to put down 25% of their half.
So they both can go on the title. They both can go on the loan. They can use a VA, but because the other person or the spouse
they're not married. If they're not married,
if they're
married, it doesn't matter. That
doesn't matter.
The whole thing.
Okay,
there's nothing there. But
so
if
boyfriend and girlfriend,
a veteran and a non-veteran, they're not married. They can do the VA loan, but the non-veteran has to put down 25% of their half, and then the veteran's entitlement will 25% will be used
of their
for that.
half.
Of their half.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that can be done. A lot of lenders don't like doing it, but it can be done.
Oh, you're just telling all the secrets, darling.
I am telling secrets.
I think I put you to the test a lot of times.
Yeah. And it's just, it's like a puzzle game, just figuring out what they're looking for and how we can make it work. But VA loan is for veterans. It's for primary property, so they can own or occupy it, but they can, buy up to a 4-unit, which means they can have rental subsidy on those from the other units, right?
I
And then
love that.
once they live in it for a year, then they can always rent the property out, go out and buy another VA loan, as long as they have. And here's the thing: is they don't even have to have all the entitlement there for them to use. They just have to have enough, and they can substitute the rest of the entitlement with a down payment. The lender needs to be secured 25% of the loan. And that could be either with the dollar amount of entitlement or a down payment, or both. Combination.
Wow.
Yep. Great loan program.
It is.
And-
it is the best.
Yeah.
And the government helps pay that mortgage. They're buying your house. Because you're getting
because the lender is protected, it's normally a better interest rate.
Right.
And the 100% financing. So it's a great loan program there. And they don't have private mortgage insurance or MIP like FHA.
Yeah.
Now, they do have something known as a funding fee. So VA charges a funding fee, and it is a part of the closing cost that can be financed. It's the only part of the closing and the cost
the
that can
only
be financed.
part.
So the VA funding fee is financed. So, if they're first time using that VA funding fee, it's usually a smaller portion. Right now it's 2.15% for the first time use. Now, if you go in to use your VA for a second time, then that could be as much as 3.3%. But again, it's financed into a loan, so it doesn't make much of a difference on your payment, and it's not paid on a monthly basis. But those funds are then what's pooled to allow VA to pay lenders in the event of a default, right?
Right.
But if you put as little as 5% down, you can drop that 3.3 down to 1.5%. So you can still put a down payment on a VA loan. You don't have to go 100% financing. You can save that VA funding fee. And then if you are a disabled vet, even if it's
my
5%
mind was
disability,
going there.
If you're
So
a disabled vet, they waive it.
they
At
waive
100%. They waive the funding fee.
The funding fee 100%. So you don't
100%.
pay it at all if you're
Don't pay it at
disabled.
all.
Is there a percentage of disability? There's no minimum.
Little as 5%. I think in order to have the VA benefits, I think you have to have at least 5% disability, right? To be considered a disability. But as long as when we order that certificate of eligibility, it says that the veteran has a disability, and then we waive the funding fee at 100%.
So there's no, there's no stipulation on how many times you can use that. I mean, every time.
If you have a disability, if you're retired and have a VA disability, we waive the funding fee on all those loan plans.
And every time you use your VA.
Just another benefit for a veteran. Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
Awesome. What a great program. What a great loan program.
I love the VA loans. They really help the veterans out. They're so easy to put together. And side by side, if I compare a VA with an FHA or conventional, 99.9% that VA loan is going to be the better loan program for them. So,
yeah,
and it's just, and really, I think, there's misconceptions, I think, between the appraisals and things like that too, about, sellers not wanting to accept a VA loan, others. But in my opinion, a VA loan, they can waive the conditions of repairs, where on other programs, you really can't. And it's such an easier program to get qualified for that I'd almost be afraid of a conventional loan, because conventional means you don't know what the guidelines are. And, it could be a conforming, it could be non-conforming, you don't know. So yeah, I wouldn't, if I was a seller, I wouldn't be afraid of these VA loans. We have,
I never have a problem with
south.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and I'm in a couple of different groups that talk about it. I personally have never had a problem with the seller accepting the offer of my veteran buyer. But there are sellers out there through the advice not to accept it.
And I think it's, again, fear of the unknown. We're in an area where VA loans are very popular at the general time. So I think most of the sellers could be veterans, so they completely understand.
Right.
In some areas, if you get into an area where they're not used to doing VA loans, they don't know what the VA loan is or what their guidelines are, the fear of the unknown. So then usually it's just out of advice of the unknown. But I wouldn't be afraid of VA loan. I love them.
I do too.
I think best
And I
program
love
out
our
there.
veterans.
And exactly. That's what I'm going to say. The veterans deserve it. That's one of the reasons the VA loans, came into play. And they really wanted their veterans to be able to come back for more and get back into the community. And one of the ways to do that is through home ownership. So we really believe that the veterans deserve a home. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you for serving, vets.
Absolutely.
Thank you for serving.
Thank you, vets. Yep. And happy Independence Day.
And happy Independence
Hopefully
Day.
everybody enjoys it. And I don't think we went over too bad today, huh?
No, we're not over at all.
I know, yeah. We could talk forever about these loan programs. So we're trying to get all this in. But, I just say, if you're a veteran out there and you're just curious, just give us a call.
Definitely.
We'll be glad to help you out.
We've got your answers.
Absolutely.
If we don't know it, we'll get one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it was fun.
It was fun. And again, I'm proud of us. Because we can talk forever. And we've kept it down.
We did. That one's for our veterans, so.
This one's for our veterans, so.
Awesome.
So we'll I guess we'll go back to the I guess where we left off on the last time. We'll kind of pick up on the next one.
Yeah. I think we were trying to look a little more detail on that contract. I think we were talking about contracts last time, right? And trying to see if somebody might look on the legal end of the contract. So we're really just, again, kind of going around that loanopoly board. I don't know if everybody remembers when we were talking about that, but just the process of the loan. But we just thought it was important to kind of get our veterans taken care of and go over a loan program today. But yeah, definitely. Yeah. And if anybody,
this was a fun detour.
Fun detour. And if anybody has any topics that they really want to know about, definitely let us know and we'll talk about it. We could talk about real estate forever, right?
I have a seller that we haven't closed yet, but he's already moved out of the house and he's in his new state. And so we were talking about a few things and he said, well, in your podcast, you said, I go, oh, you're listening to the podcast.
That's a good sign.
That is a good sign. That is a good sign.
Love it. Hopefully we're helping everybody out there. If they have any misconceptions, they listen. Yeah, absolutely. So until next time.
Coffee and Keys is brought to you by Darlene Kemp, VP, Senior Loan Officer, NMLS ID 173897. Atlantic Coast Mortgage, LLC is an equal housing lender. NMLS ID 643114. www.nmlsconsumeraccess.org. And Crystal Jacques, Realtor for both RE/MAX Allegiance, 4000 Virginia Beach Boulevard, Suite 164, Virginia Beach, Virginia 23452. Office phone 757-490-7300 and RE/MAX Professionals, 20,241 North 67th Avenue, Suite A1 Glendale, Arizona 85308. Office phone 623-362-3000. Each office is independently owned and operated and supports the Fair Housing Act and Equal Opportunity Housing.